Welcome to another Sound for Video session. It is the 13th of July, 2016. And today is a Q&A session, question and answer. And we didn't receive any questions. So I'm going to assume that you guys are all making awesome recordings and you don't have any questions, which is just fine. We have plenty of other things we can do. And what I thought I'd do is last week we talked about timecode a little bit. And again, just to put your mind at ease, I'm not here to suggest that everyone needs to invest in a bunch of timecode gear or cameras that have timecode built in. Um, I'm just preparing you for someday when you are the sound guy on a production and they've hired you because of your amazing ability to record amazing audio. And at that point, they may have a requirement to use timecode, so you'll already know how to do it because of this session and the previous session. So let me just go ahead and dive in. I'm going to move my camera here, so hold on. I don't want to make anybody seasick while we do that, and I demonstrate how this works. Okay, I think that'll work for us. We're going to go ahead and give this a go. So here I have my Sound Devices 633 mixer and recorder. This, of course, would also work with a Zoom F8, which we have here. In the case of the Zoom F8, the timecode input and output are on the back here. They use BNC connectors. And what that means is you kind of push it in and twist it. And what you hook up to these, if you're going to bring it in, is you would hook up a timecode generator via the appropriate cable. We talked about this one last week. This one's by Mo's Gear. And you would jam sync the Zoom to use the same time that this is using. Or if you use the Zoom as the master clock, it would use its own clock internally to be the master, and then you could jam sync your other device, whether it be that or something more like this. This one's called a Tentacle sync, which is kind of an interesting one. We'll work with that one today. So that's how it works on the Zoom. I don't happen to have the correct cable, the BNC connector cable, to hook either one of these up yet. I'll be getting one of those. But we did have a request to show how this is done with the Zoom F8. Everything we show you here will also work with the Zoom F8. It's just, again, I don't have this particular cable. What I would do here is I would have a BNC out cable to a 3.5 millimeter in cable. I would use this as the master clock, and this would receive jam sync from the Zoom, and then I would hook this up to my camera. So let me demonstrate here with the sound devices because I do have that cable. Put my Zoom down over here so I don't drop it on the floor. All right. This is actually new since we talked last week. This is a Tentacle sync. These guys are a couple of German fellows who I met at NAB. They have put together an interesting product called Tentacle Sync. This is a little timecode clock here. This can act as a master, or it can also be jam synced to some other master. Like in this case, we're going to sync it to the Sound Devices 633. The way it works, again, just to kind of refresh you, both clocks will have the same exact time. We'll take this smaller one and hook it up to our camera, and it will record a timecode signal to one of the microphone channels. And then in post, we can actually use that information, which has been recorded, to automatically sync them up very, very quickly. And I'll show you how all that's done. So the first thing I need to do is jam sync this to the Sound Devices 633. So I need a cable for that. This particular cable does the job. And some of these are evidently directional. So on this side, I have a LEMO connector, which is what the Sound Devices needs. And on this side, I have a 3.5 millimeter TRS stereo mini jack plug type thing. You'll notice that it shows timecode goes this direction. So it will come from the Sound Devices into the Tentacle sync. So let me get this all hooked up here. Tentacle sync, just like that. And then we will plug the LEMO connector in here. Things may get a little sloppy here. Excuse me while I get this set up. Okay, we have that connected. And it's just a matter of turning on the Tentacle sync, which is this little button here. And you can see, oh, it's talking to sound devices and it has sync. So that means it's completely synced up to the sound devices at this point when it's flashing green like that. So I can disconnect now, and this will just flash every second. Good. Okay, I can take that cable out. We're done with that. All right, now what I do is I take this cable, or sorry, this Timecode Tentacle sync, and I use a regular 3.5 millimeter to 3.5 millimeter cable, because what we want to do is record. This is actually an audio signal it's sending out, or we're going to use it that way at least. And I put that into the microphone input on my camera here. This is a DSLR. This is a Nikon D750. This does not have a timecode input. What it does have is a microphone input. So we put the other end of the cable into the microphone input. Now, what's interesting about the Tentacle sync here is that this actually also has a microphone built into it, which is kind of an interesting thing. It's hidden, I believe it's this little dot right here. Can just barely see that. So what that does is once we hook it up, the Tentacle sync up to our camera, I'm going to go into live view mode here. You can see that on the left channel on our audio meter here, that's the timecode signal. The other channel, the right channel, is what this microphone is actually recording. Check 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's definitely the microphone on that device there. So what you're getting is on the left channel, you're getting timecode. On the right channel, you're getting an audio signal. The reason that they do that, I believe, is if things go really badly, if, for example, you didn't actually properly jam sync this to the other clock, you could still potentially use that audio channel on the right to hopefully salvage your ability to sync up. But I haven't had that problem. This works very nicely. So what I would do at that point, once we're all synced up, you could actually, by the way, the Tentacle sync has what's called hook tape on the back. Sometimes I've always been used to calling it Velcro, but I think that's a trade name. But hook tape allows you to put some other tape on your rig somewhere, and you can just attach this to the rig. I put it on the back of a battery plate, so that makes it very convenient. And then you just shoot as normal. You start the camera, you start the audio recorder. You don't have to necessarily do the clap in, but it's still probably a good idea to do slate so that you know exactly what you've got. But nevertheless, you don't have to rely on the slate to sync. It would only be there for emergency. So this is set up to go in free run mode, which means that the two clocks sync to each other. And every time you start recording, it just starts recording that time code based on the clock. The clock doesn't stop in between takes. It just keeps running. And according to Tentacle Sync, this should stay in sync with higher quality clocks easily for 8 hours. Typically, I think what you would do on most productions is you would sync at the start of the day and then sync after the main meal. So if you worked, say, in the morning, you would sync at the start of that, and then you would sync again after lunch. Some people say they're getting actually even longer than that, so whatever the case may be. So once we're done, then we would bring all of this in to our computer. And actually, before I do that, let me just show you a couple of other things here. One thing we did last week, I talked a little bit about this guy here, the Mose Gear TIG Q28, which is the same thing as, essentially the same thing. It's also a time code clock. This is a much more robust build. This one's kind of a plastic, pretty good plastic, but nevertheless plastic. This one's metal, and it runs on replaceable, or on alkaline 2 AAA batteries. Excuse me. So you can swap out the batteries on that. This one works similar, but it has physical controls here that allow you to set two things. Number one, the frame rate. You always have to set the frame rate the same as your camera. So the camera, the audio recorder, and the time code clock all need to be set to the same frame rate, because the time code actually writes the time plus the frames to the time code track. This allows you to set that with a physical control here. You just use a little screwdriver to turn that to whatever your frame rate is. And then you also, on this one, have a time code level. So if you're sending it out to a camera that has an audio input like this, you don't want the sound to distort on the input channel. So you need to kind of fine tune the output level a little bit here. And that's very simple. On the Tentacle Sync, it works a little bit differently. It doesn't have any physical controls. However, what you do have is the ability to connect it to your smartphone. And this can work with either an iPhone or with Android device with a 3.5 millimeter input. You use a TRRS 3.5 millimeter cable. Hook that up. Let me just get into my app here. Okay, here's the Tentacle Sync app. And I just tell it to connect. Actually, it won't connect right now because I have it jam synced, I believe. So I'm going to turn it off, which I cannot do while it's connected. 1 second here. Okay, that's turned off. Turn it back on. Okay, there we go. Now we tell it to connect, and there it is. Okay, so we actually have the ability to set those things here. So the frame rate you can see right now is set to 23.98, which is what this camera is set to shoot at. And that's also what the sound devices is set at as well. You can choose the output volume. Again, similar thing. If you're sending it into a microphone input, you want to change it to mic output volume. If you're sending it to a line level input, you can switch that to line. So it has those options. This app is pretty cool because you can change a lot of things too. You can change the digital name of this. So if you have a whole bunch of these, if you're doing a multi-camera shoot, you can give each of them different names. There are some other things you can set here. You can set the phone. You can set the time code to the phone time if you wanted to do that for whatever reason. And you have some other things here: serial number, firmware version, the last time it was calibrated, whether or not the real-time clock is running, so on and so forth. You can output mic level. You can auto mic level enable, so this can actually adjust its mic level output level to match your camera, so it's not going to overwhelm the preamplifier on your camera. And then you can also set the auto power time off. So this is kind of cool in that you have all these different settings you can work with here. So we'll go ahead and disconnect there. All right, so we've done our shoot. We jam synced our timecode clock up front to our audio recorder, and then we actually connected this to our camera. Every time we shot, we would roll the camera, roll the sound. They would both get the same timecode written to their tracks, and then we would come back into post. So let me switch things over here. Give me just a second. Okay. All right, now I'm going to share my screen with you here. Okay, so let's say that we have, here are some audio clips that we have, or sorry, video clips that we have here that were shot with timecode. Again, using the Tentacle Sync. Actually, yeah, in this particular case, I was using the Tentacle Sync. By the way, the Mose gear writes the same exact SMPTE timecode, so they're completely compatible. So what I do is I actually have this app here called Tentacle Sync Studio. And actually, this is the one thing I don't love about, and maybe I don't understand how this works yet, but every time I use the app, I have to connect the Tentacle Sync via USB to my computer. I wish I didn't have to do that every time. In any case, let's try that. Okay, there we go. So here's the studio. All I have to do to get the audio synced up to the video is I just grab my video clips, drag those in here. I get the corresponding audio clips, drag those in here. I click on the sync map button and boom, they're all synced up. That's all it took, which is awesome. Way faster than doing that manually. And then all I have to do here is click on this XML button. I will output an XML file. And here, let's call this sync3. We also have to make sure things set correctly. So our project frame rate is 23.98. That's what we shot out. This is a 1080p project, 48 kilohertz for the audio. And you have a few different options here. You can do XML for Premiere Pro or for Final Cut Pro. And we'll go ahead and save those. Let's make sure I put that in the right place. Yeah, that's the right place. Okay, save. We're going to replace that one. Now, there are a couple of different ways you could do that. So that exported that XML file. We're going to do with the XML file. What you can do as well is you can actually have it merge the audio from with the video clips into a single new file. And that's another possibility as well. That process takes a little bit longer and is not generally how I'll work, but it is an option as well if you need that. So that's pretty helpful. Okay, next, let's go ahead and pull in everything here to Premiere Pro. And Premiere Pro is taking longer and longer to open these days. Okay, let's do our sync test here. Okay, once I'm in Premiere Pro, all I need to do is import that XML file that I created over in Tentacle Sync Studio. So I just double click here. Let's see here. Ooh, that was a teaser. I didn't intend for that to happen, but that was a teaser. I have been this week working full time on my audio post processing course. I'm pretty excited about that. So that should be coming up here soon. I think I put it in here. Yes. Okay. Here's the file that we created, sync3.xml. I double click that. And that's interesting. That brings in a sequence here. And it also brings in all of the original media. So it took care of all that importing for me in one click. Awesome. Now I open up this sequence here, and you can see all of the video and audio clips are synced up and ready to go. So what I can do here is just link that up. And let's just pull that over here. You can see it's linked now. If I zoom in, this might get a little tricky because I have this Google Plus thing in my way. All right, let's just see if it's synced it up correctly. We're going to go frame by frame. I actually went ahead and did the claps just to double check the sync. Here comes the clap. And let me just open up this audio a little bit more so you can see the claps. Maybe hard to see. Google Plus Hangouts don't do the highest resolution, but they're getting ready to. And on the next frame, it should make contact. Nope, one more frame. Synced perfectly. Good. Okay. So there is an example of how Timecode works and how it can simplify the post workflow quite nicely. So even if you're going to do a dual system audio where you have a recorder and a camera and you're recording the sound separately on the audio recorder from the camera, Timecode makes it a lot quicker in post. Now, this should kind of help you to understand now. This is why a lot of larger budget productions actually require Timecode because this makes things so much faster and easier for their post-production crew and their editors and saves them a lot of time. It's a lot cheaper to spend, say, $500 on a set of Tentacle syncs than it is to have some guy that they're paying, maybe $120 an hour or whatever it happens to be plus overhead to do all the syncing manually. So again, not something necessarily you need to do on your own passion projects and no budget films, but once you start moving into places where you're working on films with a budget, you can see why they prefer to use Timecode and how it simplifies the process for them. So hopefully that was helpful for you.